What's up, gorgeous people? It's Amber. Welcome back to my channel. So, you know how I'm making all of these DIYs on my channel all of the time with the clothes, and you'll see me cut like bulk of stuff off, and you're probably thinking, what does she do with the rest of it? Well, the rest of everything that I don't use when I'm making something goes into this big scrap pile. So I eventually build up enough scraps where I revisit that pile to see if there's anything that I can make out of the scraps that I have left over from all of these DIYs that I'm doing all of the time. So that's what we're going to do today. I found some scraps that were actually large chunks of scraps left over. One was left over from a skirt DIY that I did. I just took the skirt in at the top and then I cut the bottom off because it was too long. So I'm using the big chunk of the bottom to make the top in this particular DIY. And then I had a sweater that was just way too big. So for some reason, I am not exactly sure why, and I do not know which DIY I did this with. I really have no idea. But I took out like the center part of the sweater and I used it for something. What? I'm not sure. I'm going to have to go through my closet and see what that was actually used for because I have no idea. So I have just like the neck left of the sweater. I have the sleeves, and then I have like the bottom part of the sweater. So those are the pieces and parts that we're going to be using for this particular DIY. Now I'm going to be doing some other DIYs in the future where the scraps aren't as large as these ones, but I just wanted to show you that you should keep the scraps that you have, especially if they're substantial pieces. And this is just revisit that pile after it gets, a little bit bigger so that you can pick and choose what scraps you want to use to mix and match scraps to put them together to make yourself an outfit. I mean, it's better than throwing everything away. So the way that I figure it is I'm just going to keep piling them up, and eventually I'm going to continue to revisit them and then make something out of them. So I suggest that you do the same thing. If you don't want to, of course you don't have to, but I am a sustainable crafter, so I am always trying to think of ways to reuse things, and that's what I do with my scraps. So now that I've got all of that out of the way, without further ado, let's get into how I made this outfit. Materials are in the description box below. We're going to start with that bottom half of the sweater and we're going to turn it into a skirt. So I'm going to take a skirt that I know fits me well, put it on top to use as my template. I'm going to cut around the skirt, leaving about a 1/2 inch to a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Now, I want to suggest if you're going to use a skirt for your template, as I've done here, make sure that you're using a skirt that is the same type of material. This is a stretchy skirt. The sweater is stretchy material as well, so it totally works. So now that I have that done, I'm going to take those two pieces, I'm going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to pin them down the sides. So anytime I pin things together, I always start at the bottom, and I put like a couple pins in here, but usually I put a pin at the bottom and then I go straight to the top and put another pin in, and then I fill in the center. I just find that this is the easiest way for me to make sure that everything is lined up perfectly for when I sew it together. So once I get all of the pins down this side, I'm going to do the exact same process to the other side, and then I'm going to sew it together. And then bam, it's all sewn together. So the next thing that I want to do is go ahead and cut off the excess fabric that I have here. You do not want to leave that excess fabric on there because it will create unnecessary bulk when you're wearing the garment. So make sure that you cut off any excess fabric that you don't need after it's sewn together. Make sure you've tried it on first, make sure it fits good before you cut anything away. Now that I've done that, I'm going to turn the skirt right side out. The only thing left for us to do here is create a hem at the top. So I'm going to go ahead and fold that down, throw it through my sewing machine, and boom, here we go. We have a hem. And guess what, guys? The skirt is completely done. Super easy. Now we're going to move on to the sleeves. So I know that these sleeves are too long, so I just go ahead and make the decision to cut a little bit of fabric off. Didn't measure anything, totally winging it here, so I don't suggest doing this, but that's what I did. So I'm just going to match up that sleeve that I just cut with the other sleeve to make sure that they're the same size. Now that I've done that, I'm going to move on to that top part of the sweater that we have left over. So I'm going to go ahead and throw this on my mannequin so I can get a better idea of what I'm working with here. So I'm taking that bottom half of what was a skirt at one time, and I'm going to go ahead and pin it onto my mannequin because my thought process here is to go ahead and just sew the black part to this plaid part to make my shirt. I think it looks kind of cool all broke up like that with the black and then the plaid. So I'm pinning this on to the dress form here, and then when I first did this, I thought that I could just go in a complete circle to pin it on to the dress form. But after I pinned it on here, I realized that the two sides were not lining up. I'm not exactly sure what happened when I cut it, when I hemmed that one skirt, but maybe I did something a little bit wrong. I'm not really sure. All I know is when I just wrapped each side down, it was not lining up properly. So I have a lot of excess fabric that's just kind of dangling off to the side that you can kind of sort of see here. So what I decided to do when I discover this problem that I'm having, I'm discovering it right now. I'm like, ooh, those sides do not line up at all. That's going to be a nightmare to sew. So I make the executive decision to go ahead and unpin that first part and just cut right there at the seam, because I could see that with the additional fabric that I had there, that they were lining up perfectly, like the two sides were lining up perfectly, giving me enough length that I would have wanted for the shirt. So I make the decision to just cut that off, and then I'm just going to match up that additional fabric that I had laying there to finish making the shirt. So I hope that that's not confusing for you, but that's pretty much what I decided to do here. And when you're working with scraps, you kind of just have to figure it out as you go, which is exactly what I'm doing here, because things aren't always going to line up. You're working with scraps. They're not always cut perfectly. Everything doesn't always line up. But now, as you can see, that was a good decision because things are lining up a lot better. So I'm just going to go ahead and snip off all of the excess that I have on the side here, leaving enough to make sure I can pin that other side together. And it's looking pretty good. So I'm like, all right, I think that this is lining up good. Now the next thing that I want to make sure of is, see how I want to put that sleeve on there? I want to make sure that I have the right amount of space for my armhole. So I'm going to go ahead and flip the mannequin to the side here so that you can see I'm pulling those two pieces of fabric together to make sure that I have enough space to leave an armhole, which I do. So it's all looking good. So now I'm going to rip everything off the mannequin and pin it together so that we can start making the shirt. Okay, so now that we've got all of that done, I realized that also that top part of this black sweater was not lining up. So I'm going to go ahead and level everything out to make sure that everything is even, because again, we are working with scraps, so everything is not perfect. So I want to make sure to line it up as best I can. Now that I've done that, I'm going to go ahead and take those two pieces of plaid that we just cut on the mannequin, and we're going to go ahead and pin them onto the black piece. So I'm just going to go ahead and flip it inside out so that I have the right sides together to pin it to that black piece. So I'm just literally going to pin it along the black piece here so that I can sew it all together. And then once I have this front part pinned, I'm going to go ahead and do the exact same thing to the back part that I'm doing on the front part here. So I'm just going to pin that second plaid piece to the back part of the shirt. See, it's looking pretty good. So now I'm going to go ahead, flip it over, and do the exact same thing, pinning that second piece onto the black part of the shirt. Okay, now that that's done, everything's pinned together. It's looking pretty good to me. I'm going to go ahead and sew it together. So there you go. Everything is sewn together. Looking pretty good so far. We're looking more like a shirt here. So I'm going to go ahead and flip it inside out. And then I noticed that there's a lot of excess of the plaid fabric on the side here. So I'm just going to go ahead and line everything up so that the black and the plaid are about, the same length. So I'm just going to go ahead and snip off that excess with my scissors here so that I can line everything up so that I can sew down the sides of that plaid fabric next. And the only reason why I'm sticking the pin in there is just to make sure that everything stays in place while I'm cutting it. So it's looking pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead, cut this other side down, and there you go. So the next thing that I want to do obviously is pin those sides down, just the plaid part, because remember, we need to leave an armhole so that we can sew on that sleeve. So we're going to sew down the plaid part. So now that that's all done, I'm going to go ahead and measure the sleeve to make sure that it's the same size as the armhole that I've left, and it's not the same size. So what I'm going to do here is just line it up to the point where it is about the right size, and I'm just going to cut it off. Now, I don't suggest doing this because I haven't tried this on, so I don't even know if the sleeve is going to be the right length or not. So you might want to try your sleeve on and figure out what the right length is, and then just work with whatever you have to do to make the armhole work. But I don't suggest just randomly cutting as I'm doing here, because that's probably going to be a cause for disaster if it doesn't work out. So now, leaving the shirt inside out, I'm going to feed the sleeve through the shirt, and then I'm going to pin it together. So that way you're pinning right sides together. So the sleeve was still facing the right way, and then the shirt was inside out. So I slid it underneath the shirt so that I could pin it together with the right sides facing each other. Hope again that that's not too confusing for you, but that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin around the armhole here, and you're going to see me play around with a little bit, because even though I lined it up roughly to where it needed to be, there was still a little bit of excess fabric that I ended up having, which is fine, but I needed to figure out a way to make that work in the sleeve so that it was all, you know, completely flush and there was no bulk or anything happening there. So you can see me pulling it and just making it work. And that's kind of what you have to do here, you know, when you're working with scraps and things like that, or just winging it like I am. So now that I have it all pinned together, I always make sure that I turn things right side out to make sure that they're looking the way that I expect them to for when I sew them together. Looking pretty good. So I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other side. Now that that's done, our sleeves are on, everything's looking really good. We need to do something with that bottom, but before I do that, I have to cut off the excess that I have left over from sewing those armholes on. Always make sure that you go in and cut off any excess fabric, because again, this is going to leave unnecessary bulk in your garment and it's not going to look right when you're wearing it. So always make sure that you clean up any of that excess fabric that you might have when you sew your things together. So now that I've done that, I'm going to flip everything right side out. Well, I guess I'm working on the other side here. Sorry about that. So I make sure that you do both sides. But as I said, just make sure you're cleaning everything up, and then you're ready to flip it right side out here. Here we go. Now that I'm going to flip it right side out, I'm ready to deal with that bottom of the shirt, because obviously I'm not going to leave it like that. So I had some trim that I thought would look really good with this, because I think it needs a pop of color. So I'm just going to go ahead and pin that trim along the bottom of the shirt here. And this trim wasn't exactly the same size, but it was stretchy. So I just ended up making it work because I was determined to use this exact trim. So I'm going to go ahead and pin it all down, sew it together, and here's what it's going to look like. Boom, we're going to be set, ready to go. And that's it, guys. This has been such an easy DIY. Woohoo! Okay, so there you go. I mean, that was a pretty easy DIY. All I did was take what was left of the neck of the sweater, and then I just added that long piece that was left over from the skirt and just literally wrapped around and sewed it and made a top after, and then of course added the sleeves. I mean, that was really simple, guys. That was a very easy thing for me to be able to do with those leftover scraps. Now, I always have trims on hand for myself. I find good deals on trims all the time at Joann Fabrics, you know, Michael's, wherever I'm shopping at the time. And I just clear out all of their clearance if it's a really good deal. And I just decide what I'm going to do with the trims later. So I always revisit my trim bin to see if there's anything that I can use in it. And for this one, I knew that that needed some type of brightness in the outfit, because I mean, we had that really dark black left over from the sweater, and then the skirt itself was very dark as well. I mean, it was like dark black and dark brown. So is there any other color for black besides dark? But at any rate, it was dark brown and black, and then just tiny peaks of the white. So I knew I needed like a pop of white on the bottom somewhere. So that's why I decided to put that white lace, it was like a yarn lace trim along the bottom of the shirt, because I think that it added a nice brightness to the outfit amongst all of the darkness that was going on. So at any rate, I hope that you found this helpful or useful in some way. If you did, please hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell, like, share, do all of those things to help other people find this channel. I have so many more ideas in the future for scraps, for toddler clothing, for all kinds of things. So look forward to many more fun DIYs and some unorthodox materials that I'm going to be using soon, and some DIYs you're going to see, like how I use the napkins for the NFL gear. I'm going to have a lot of other DIYs coming up like that as well. So look forward to lots more fun fashion DIYs on a budget. And if you are a new subscriber, please let me know. I would love to say thank you. And thank you so much to everybody who's followed me so far. You have no idea how much it means to me, how fun this journey is for me so far, even though there's of course going to be a lot of people who don't like me and have a lot of negative things to say. I'm still so thankful for all of you who are positive and sending me all of the positive energy and encouragement. So I can't thank everybody enough, and I will catch you in my next video. Bye! Alter to skirt or alter to sweater, which is the case in this situation. And my son just woke up, so I have to go. I'll come back and do this in a minute. And then the skirt was a cool plaid print, but it was like mainly black and brown, which was very, very dark brown. I wish I could talk. Again,